Okay, so I guess we should get started. It's the top of the hour. Before we jump in, I just wanted a quick show of hands. How many people here are currently using Chocolatey? Cool. Currently using Chef? Good. Currently using Chocolatey and Chef? A few, that's good. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to switch to this screen. What I have in terms of slides are available there, and also the code. There's not much code behind it, but the code is available on GitHub. So those are available if you need them. So I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking to you about some of the questions around Chocolatey and hopefully trying to answer some of them. And there will be some demos involved as well. So the first question that I want to try and answer is, so what is Chocolatey? So from a definition standpoint, Chocolatey allows you to deploy any Windows software anywhere with anything and manage and track that software over time. Okay, so that's kind of the one line, this is what Chocolatey is. If we break that down a little bit, Chocolatey is, I wanted to put the package manager, but we'll say it's a package manager for Windows. So Chocolatey is a package manager for Windows. It's very similar to the likes of apt-get and yum on Linux, and then Homebrew on your Mac. With Chocolatey, you can, as we kind of stated, we can manage any software, not just installers. So your typical installers would be your EXEs and your MSIs, but you might be dealing with zip files, configuration scripts. All of those can be packaged as a Chocolatey package and deployed across your environment. With Chocolatey, you can define dependencies between those packages. So if your application depends on another application, then you can define that dependencies and they will be resolved as part of the installation of those packages. Everything's done with PowerShell, and you can write that deployment once and use it in multiple places. With Chocolatey, you're allowed to test your deployments before going into production. So it's really important, obviously, to be able to ensure that that thing works before going into a production environment. Chocolatey allows you to deploy onto anything that runs Windows, all the way back to, if you really, really need to, all the way back to Windows XP and Server 2003. Anyone still using those? That's good. And obviously with the newer systems, Docker containers and so on, you can deploy Chocolatey on there as well. And it also allows you to do tracking and reporting and software. Now, all of that's great. What I like to think of Chocolatey though, and this is where I started, is it is quite simply magic, right? And I'm going to try and explain why I say that, but when I first started using Chocolatey many years ago, I was kind of blown away with what you could do with it. And it's really about, well, what problem is Chocolatey trying to solve? Chocolatey is trying to solve the age-old problem that is the Windows software ecosystem. Because when we look at the software ecosystem, traditionally, Windows was designed with visual interfaces in mind. And what I mean by that is there's no more place more evident of that than when we look at the Windows installer ecosystem. So in that Windows ecosystem, we sometimes feel like this, right? We sometimes feel like this, and we just wish we had another job. I quite like the idea of being a postman, but I'm here, right? Because when we look at that Windows software ecosystem, we're talking about over 20 different installer formats with multiple thousands of different kinds of installers in the wild. There's zip files, there's other archive formats. Software installers are messy. Some things end up in the registry and they aren't tidied up. Files are dropped in the file system in various places. It literally sometimes feels like it's the Wild West, and we have to question why we're doing this. Now, in terms of Chocolatey, why did I start using Chocolatey and how does it work? So Chocolatey, when you break it down, it's that package manager, but it comes in the form of a couple of simple commands that anyone can execute. So if we take, for example, the installation of Paint.net, we can install Paint.net with Chocolatey as a package. And when we need to, we can upgrade it. If we need to, we can uninstall it. And once we are managing applications in our environment with Chocolatey, we've got a command that is choco upgrade all. So that will literally go across all of the packages that you've got, and it will make an attempt to upgrade all of those to the latest versions that are available based on your sources. Now, by default, Chocolatey comes and it points at what we refer to as the Chocolatey community repository. That's what most people think of when they think of Chocolatey, but it's not the only source that you can use. But that community repository today, I took this screenshot yesterday, I think, it has almost 6,800 unique packages. So we like to think we've got most packages that people require covered for. We go all the way from Choco install Winderstat as a utility application, all the way up to Choco install Visual Studio 2019. Okay, those are available in that community repository. The metric at the bottom there is there are 5,000 known good packages. Now what that's referring to is that there is a bunch of automation on chocolatey.org, and every so often we go through and ensure that the packages still work. So we have some automation that runs behind the scenes, and at last count, of those 6,800 packages, 5,000 are known to be good, in the sense that they install with a non-zero exit code. Okay, so I clarify that, because I can't guarantee the application actually works because the installer might be broken, but it returned a non-zero exit code. Okay, so all of this is great. We can use Chocolatey and the Chocolatey community repository to install 6,800 packages onto our machine. So what's the catch? The main catch that I want to speak about is that as an organization, and I've spoke to a few people throughout the week this week in this regard. When it comes to an organization, you can't trust the community repository, right? And what I mean by that is I'm a package maintainer. I maintain packages on chocolatey.org. You as a company can't trust me. I'm some random dude from Scotland, and you can't trust the packages that I maintain. Now, I would like you to, obviously, that's why I put them out there. But as an organization, we as organizations can't trust those packages. So what we need, there's a little bit more work that we need to do to make full use of Chocolatey in the organization. And what I'm talking about there is that you may want to create your own packages and store them internally in your own repositories. There's multiple ways you can do that. And then when you finish those packages and you have them ready, you want to store them in your own repository. So that will be Artifactory, Nexus, ProGet. There's multiple options out there when it comes to repositories. And ideally, you would switch off the community repository source in Chocolatey. You would remove it because you shouldn't be using it anymore. Once we have those internal repositories and those internal packages, we can look to use things like Chef, Puppet, SCCMs to help with the deployment of those packages across our environment. And then obviously when it comes to the reporting point of view, you want to use your current reporting, or maybe use something like central management that we'll touch on in a bit, or you might have your own handcrafted reporting. Now all of this kind of hinges on the assumption that you have some sort of source control system in place in your environment. So all of those packaging files that you're creating, they're ending up in source control. And you may use things like Jenkins, TeamCity, or some other CI/CD pipeline to help with the creation of those packages and the maintenance of them as well. So we have this diagram that we like to show. So this is your kind of typical, or what we like to think of is your typical architecture when it comes to Chocolatey, and it's really just a pictorial version of what I just showed you. So there is a little bit of work. Now all of this is documented on chocolatey.org, so I would encourage you to go out and if you are interested in any part of this, the setup of this architecture is fully documented on chocolatey.org. But really that's where the catch is. There's a little bit of work to do. Chocolatey.org and the community repository is really first and foremost, it's aimed at the individual developer using it to maintain their own machines. But when we start talking about multiple tens of hundreds and thousands of machines, the community repository is not where it's at. Now, the other catch, the other physical catch that I want to make you aware of is that we recently turned on rate limiting on chocolatey.org. So if you install Chocolatey too many times within a minute, or you install too many packages within a minute, you will start to get a 429 response back from the Chocolatey server saying you're not getting to play anymore. So it's at that point you should really be looking at an architecture like this to bring those packages in-house and to make use of them. Okay, so this question I put up here is, well, what do I get when I pay for Chocolatey? Now, what I want to point out here is Chocolatey has always been an open source project. It's been open source for about 8 years now. But about 3 years ago, it became a commercial entity. So there is some business features that add on to what you get with the open source version of Chocolatey. So what I'm showing here is just some of those. I'm going to demo some of these quickly, just to let you see them. The first one there at the top there is CCM. That's our Chocolate Central Management, and it's our kind of real-time dashboard across all the assets. So Chocolatey out the box gives a lot of very good auditing at the computer level. You can walk up to any computer that's got Chocolatey on it, and you can run some commands to get that information about what's installed, what's out of date, etc. But we've now got a website that brings all of that back into one central location, and you can generate reports for compliance and so on. So that's that one. The one in this middle here is Chocolatey again is a command line driven application first and foremost. But we have had requests from customers that we want the ability to have some graphical user interfaces. I spoke again about Windows historically being this GUI-driven environment, and we've added to that to an extent. But it's for a good reason. We've added some GUIs because there was a request for those. On top of those, there's things like Package Internalizer. Package Internalizer here is a utility tool for helping take those packages from the likes of the community repository and bringing them fully internal in your environment. So that's the process that we speak about in terms of vetting those packages and making sure that they are doing what you want them to do, and you can then bring them in-house into your environment. The other one that I like to speak about, because I'm kind of the main maintainer of it, is Chocolatey GUI. Some people say we should have called that GUI Chocolatey, but we missed a little bit of a trick there when we came to naming it. But it's a GUI interface, but it provides in the Chocolatey for Business version, it allows self-service. So you can give Chocolatey GUI and Chocolatey to people within your environment that don't have admin permissions, but they're still allowed to install applications onto their machines by using the combination of Chocolatey GUI and that self-service function that we have. And the last one there is some functions around essentially Chocolatey tidying up itself. The combination of Chocolatey and the way the Windows installers work, you typically end up with lots of files across the file system that you don't necessarily need once the installation is complete. So Package Reducer is a tool that will go through and ensure that all the non-necessary files are tidied up from a Windows perspective once those installations are taking place. And final one there, if you need it, is a package throttle. So you can actually tell Chocolatey to not download it to the full capability of the bandwidth available to reduce that if you need it in your environment. So those are some of the features. So I just quite quickly wanted to show some of those. So the first one I wanted to show was really speaking to that internalization of packages from, let's say, the community repository. So let's say you've been using the community repository, you're starting to hit those rate limits of Chocolatey.org, and you want to start bringing those packages in-house. What we have here is, this is essentially Package Internalizer. So with one command, what I can do is I can say, I want to go to Chocolatey.org, I want to download the package that is Google Chrome, but at the same time, I want to internalize all URLs that are in that package. So what that's doing is typically, most packages on Chocolatey.org are wrappers around a known URL. So from a point of view for distribution rights, Chocolatey.org doesn't have the rights to host the actual native installer of an application because, well, as an example, Microsoft wouldn't want us hosting the installer for Office or the installer for Visual Studio. So all that is really in the package is the known location of the installer. Chocolatey installation time will run off, download that, and then perform the installation. But in an organizational point of view, you're not subject to those same distribution rights. So what we can do with this command is we can say, go and actually grab me that installer, download it, and actually recreate me a NuGet package or a NUPKeg that has all of that in it. So I can run this command if I go over here and I say download. So what we'll see happening here is exactly what I've just said. It's going to find Google Chrome, but it's also going to find any dependencies that that Google Chrome package has, and it's going to download them and put them into the folder that I told it to. So over here in this internal folder, I will see that there's a dependency on a thing called the Chocolatey core extension. And then what it's currently doing down at the bottom here is it's then downloading the MSI that is Google Chrome And it's downloading 2 of them because there's obviously the x86 version and the x64-bit version of Google Chrome. It's downloading both of those, and it's going to create me a NuGet package, a Chocolatey package or a NupKeg that will contain those and then have the installation script that goes with it. So what we've now got here is a package that's 111 megabytes in size because it's got both of those things in it. But what we've also got in this download folder is the automatically generated installation script that's correctly formatted to best practices and everything that's needed. So those files are the ones that you put into your source control system, having downloaded that from the internet. Okay? The other side of things is that internally, you might already have all of these installers. You don't need to go ahead and download them with the internalizer. So what we give as part of the business edition is the thing that we call Package Builder. So I can go ahead here and right-click on this and say, I want to create a package. So this is Package Builder UI that I spoke about. So in here, I can fill out any information, any additional information that I want to use. Typically, what's going to happen here is that actually Chocolatey is going to reach into that file, that exe of that MSI, and it's going to extract all the information that it can. So if I go ahead and click Generate here, then it's going to run off and it's going to generate me that same packaging files, and it's going to generate me that NupKeg as well. So you can do that through the GUI version, but we can also do that if I go ahead and delete that folder so that I don't create it again. I delete this NupKeg. I can right-click on that file again and say, create me without the GUI. So that's where the automation starts to come into play. You can create a script that then attaches itself to a UNC share where all of those EXEs and MSIs are within your environment, and then within 5 or 10 seconds for each of those, it will generate you a package and the the packaging scripts that go with it that you can then upload into your source control system. And the final one that I wanted to show was that once you've got a NupKeg, you can then right-click and say, push it. You can then take it and push it into that repository that you have, whether that's Nexus or Artifactory. Okay? So there's lots more business features, but that's the ones I was going to speak about just now. The other one that I wanted to show, and I mentioned it a couple of times, but I'm going to mention it again because, well, I'm the lead developer on it, so I get to. Okay, so this is my product that's coming out in the next. It's imminently coming out within the next. I'm going to say week. It's been in beta for a while now, but the final version is going to come out hopefully soon. And then in a couple of weeks, there will be a webinar to describe all the features that go with it. So I'm hoping you'll be able to check that out. So the next question I wanted to answer was, well, what does Chocolatey integrate with? So I like this next one. Everything, right? Chocolatey, at its heart, is just a command line application. You can run it on anything. You can run it with all of the major configuration management platforms, the Puppets, the Chef, the Ansibles, the Salt stacks, and then you can integrate it with all of the major repository systems out there, Otter, ProGet, Artifactory, etc. And then a wider stance, if you need to, you can work with things like Box Starter and Octopus Deploy. So we like to think that it does integrate with everything. Specifically talking about things like Chef, and we'll come on to that in a bit, there's built-in support in Chef for Chocolatey. So that leads me on nicely to, well, how do we integrate Chef with Chocolatey? The answer to that is obviously cookbooks and resources. When it comes to actually installing and provisioning Chocolatey, there's a Chocolatey community cookbook, and that's one that is owned by us, the Chocolatey team, and that will allow you to perform the installation of Chocolatey when you need to on any nodes in your environment. But out of the box, since 12.7 of Chef Client, there are built-in resources that you can use for actually installing a Chocolatey package. So it's kind of the same, the format that you would expect. It's Chocolatey package and then a name, and then within the do, you have options for what action you want to take, and then specifying additional parameters for the Chocolatey package. So if you need to install a specific version of a package, or you need to pass additional options into the underlying native installer, or into the package parameters themselves, you can do that through this Chocolatey resource. Through this Chef resource, sorry. The other resource that's available is Chocolatey Source. The reason you need to use this is kind of as I described. Typically, you want to ensure that you're not using the community repository when you're deploying through artifacts through Chef in Chocolatey. So you use the Chocolatey source resource to disable the built-in one for community repository, and then you would use it to add your other one, add your new source, which is your Artifactories, your Nexus, etc. And the final one that's available today is the Chocolatey config resource, and that is specifically for setting up Chocolatey. Chocolatey has a number of parameters for setting things like cache locations, different settings within Chocolatey, so you can use that resource to do that. Okay? So as an example, this is a very simple example of me installing the Git command line utility. So I'm going to include that default Chocolatey cookbook, which is going to do the provisioning, the installation of Chocolatey itself. And then I'm going to use the Chocolatey package with an action of install to perform that. Okay? Now, what I'm going to say is don't do that, right? If we jump back here, include by default that Chocolatey cookbook is going to install Chocolatey from the community repository. So as I've just described to you, you're going to hit a rate limit if you do that. Okay, so if you deploy this cookbook out to 100 nodes in your system and they all go and try and attempt to install Chocolatey at the same time, you're going to get rate limited. Okay, so please don't do this. Instead, what you should be using is one of the attributes that comes with the Chocolatey cookbook that allows you to specify the download URL for Chocolatey itself. At that point, you can use that internal source to do that installation, and you're not going to hit that rate limit that I've mentioned. Okay. And then, obviously, using the Chocolatey source resource, you would then configure the source on that machine to take the packages themselves from your internal repository. So what I'm going to try and show now is a demo of that happening. Stephen will testify that my demos didn't go very well this morning, so I'm going to try. But effectively, what I've got here is I've got a Chef server running on this machine. I've got a Chef workstation, and I've got a Chef a client machine that I'm going to try and deploy things onto. So what I'm showing you here is that if I try and run Choco, I have Chocolatey installed. I shouldn't have Chocolatey installed. Okay, so that's a bad start. So let's go ahead and delete Chocolatey. If I try and run Chocolatey again, Chocolatey is not there. Okay? And I also don't have Git installed. That's what I'm trying to install. So I'm trying to install Git. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this a second. I'm going to reopen it again. So I've already uploaded some cookbooks into this Chef server. So I'm just going to edit the run list for this server, and I'm going to take this one out, and I'm going to put this one in. Okay? So no, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to save that. I'm going to cd into C opscode Chef and the bin folder, and then in here I'm just going to run Chef client. Okay, so I don't have Chocolatey installed, but in the run list just now, I have an all nodes cookbook, and in that all nodes cookbook, I have got the Chef cookbook installation and then the Chocolatey cookbook installation. So it should provision Chocolatey onto this machine for me. So if I hit return here, what we'll see happening over here on the right-hand side is that Chocolatey will be downloaded from the internet, and we'll see it install into the default folder, which is the C program data folder. So in here, Chocolatey has now been extracted, it's available on that machine, and it's ready to be used. Okay? Now if I go into the lib folder, the only thing that I've got in there right now, the only package that Chocolatey is aware of, is itself. Okay? So the next one is if I go and edit that run list again and pull over the install git cookbook and then run that again. Let's clear this out and run that again. So this time, with that cookbook applied to this node, it should now use Chocolatey that's installed, and it'll run off and it'll try and install Git for me. So what we should see is that a new folder will be dropped into the lib folder, and that's the Git Chocolatey package. And then the installer, the native installer for Git, will be executed on this machine. And what we should see in add remove programs here, once it refreshes, we should get Git. But if we go back to here, and it's not quite finished, that's why. So now it's finished. Now if we go back, now we've got Git installed, okay? And I can prove that if I go over here, if I try and run Git, it's not going to work because Git installed itself to it's updated the path on my environment, so the Git executable isn't available. But one of the things that Chocolate comes with is this refresh env, but that's not going to work because a profile is not set up properly, so I can't show you that. But having refreshed the environment, I've then got Git available, so Git's then installed, okay? The next one is obviously the uninstall of Git, so it's the exact same thing. I have a demo for this, but I'm not going to show that because I'm conscious of the time. But essentially, it will do the inverse of that. It will run the uninstall action, and it will take that package out. When we start looking at a more complicated example, such as this one was actually written by Laura, who's in the audience here. This is a more complicated cookbook, but it's combining the power of both Chocolatey and Chef. So what we're doing here is we're installing this thing that we call Chocolatey Server. So Chocolatey Server is an open source version of a Nexus or an Artifactory repository server. It's not necessarily the best one to use at high scale, but in terms of getting started, it's a good one for the purpose of demos, and that's why I'm showing it. So again, we're using the default recipe. I'm going to create a directory, so I'm using the built-in resources that come with Chef. I'm going to install that Chocolatey Server package. I'm going to use the Chocolatey config resource to set some configuration settings within Chocolatey. I'm going to then enable some Windows features, which is IIS. And then I'm going to change my Chocolatey source, and I'm going to delete the one that I had before. So this is me setting up for an internal environment. This is me removing Chocolatey community repository and setting it to the new one that I've just installed. Okay? So if we do that, go back over here again to the run list, we'll be able to see that running through. So if I take that install git one out just for the sake of it, and then save the run list again. So just to prove that there's kind of hopefully no smoke and mirrors going on. I don't currently have IIS installed. I'm trying to run the Internet Services Manager there. It's not installed. But if I, having saved that run list, run I'm in the wrong folder now, so cd into opscode, chef, bin, and then run chef client again. It will then do all of the things that was in that cookbook. And then at that point, in theory, I've got a fully set up server that I could use for the purposes of pushing packages to then consume within my internal organization. So what we'll see as that runs through is we'll see a number of additional packages being added into the Chocolatey lib folder, so the Chocolatey server and some of its dependencies. And then when it gets to it, it will have IIS installed. So we'll just let this run through. This is probably a good opportunity for any questions, if anyone had any, while this is running through. Any questions from anyone so far? Yes?
Does Chocolatey support multi-threaded installations?
The question is, does Chocolatey support multi-threaded installations? I would counter that by saying, does Windows support multi-threaded installations?
For example, there are some applications that can't be installed.
So what I'm getting at is that if you can install an application in parallel with another one with a Chocolatey, then yes, you could do that through Chocolatey as well. At the minute, you can have multiple Chocolatey processes running at the same time. It's not necessarily recommended for the reason that I was kind of expressing there, that potentially two MSI installations will conflict with each other. So probably the answer should be no, but the actual answer I'll give is it depends. Don't do it. Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay. So that's still running through, and then that's finished. So what we've now got, if I go back down here and do what I was trying to do before, which was to start, and I type it properly. Excuse me. So now we've got Internet Explorer. Now we've got IIS installed. It's removed the default site, and I've got a Chocolatey site. And if I go and look at the output from the Choco source command, I've no longer got that community repository in there. all I've got is the internal one that I've installed. And then if I go up to here and look at localhost, then what we should have is the Chocolate server, also known as the simple server for good reason, which I could then push packages to. Okay? So jumping back to the slides for a second, I just wanted to caveat that the installation of Chocolate server is good in terms of demonstration for Chef, but the recommendation for a larger scale organization would be to use something like one of these, simply because they handle much more a bigger feature set in terms of multiple authentication types, support for multiple feeds within the same server, things like disaster recovery and high availability. So those things need to be taken into consideration when thinking about that internal architecture. So at this point, what I wanted to do is to bring Laura onto stage. Laura is one of our customers, and she's going to talk about how she's been using Chocolate in her environment. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Milton, and I currently develop and maintain the backend infrastructure for Texas A&M University College of Architecture. As Gary said, we are a customer of Chocolatey for business. So as a little background of just me, I've used Chocolatey for several years now, mostly for personal use, and then I've just now gotten into using the Chef resources on cookbooks. So the support ops team came across Chocolatey and then saw the business solution, and they did like it, and so we set up a proof of concept. One of the things that we really did like about the business solution is mostly just because we were able to package and get software into a local repo, and that way we can use specialized software that has license already built in and such. It also allowed us to help manage endpoints as code rather than through a GUI or anything else. We also wanted a way to update software on computers automatically, force them, whatever we needed to do. We also needed a way to contact computers as well as get data and logs back from them, even if they were off network, aka outside the firewall, as well as getting data and logs back from the computer, because audits and stuff. So we really did like it, and this way we could also manage endpoints and servers the same way, same packages, versions, yada yada. So since we use the DevOps method and infrastructure as code, we wanted to be able to have a cookbook for it. So as Gary had mentioned, I wrote a cookbook. I did use Simple Server with it, and after the proof of concept, we wanted to buy it, so I did that. Oh, I did really like the Central Management Console, or Chocolatey Central Management Console, just because of the data and logs it gets back from computers, as well as the software that it reports back. So whenever you put the Choco agent on a computer, you can say, look at everything within AppWiz, was it programs and features? I don't know, AppWiz, and it'll take everything underneath that and put it underneath Chocolatey control. So we like that a lot because it also reports back to the CCM console, and it says this software is out of date versus this software is good. So for audit purposes, we did need this, and it was a really great feature that we liked a lot. As I said, there was no cookbook to set up the central management console, so I ended up writing one. It is all based off the Chocolatey documentation that is on their website, as well as a few gotchas that I came across while manually installing it. So one of the few gotchas that I came across was I was trying to put, since I did use Simple Server and I wanted the CCM console, I tried to put it on the same machine, and that does not work. You have to have 2 separate servers for each thing. And then one of the other things that I had issues with was just third-party certs, adding it in. So it's, if you can get it to work, good. If not, I couldn't get that to be put in. So this is a link to my cookbook. I did use Simple Server, 2 different recipes for server and CCM. Please use it. I put it on github.com, and it will soon be on Chef Supermarket, so that way it's super easy to find. But please use it. Please report any issues or anything like that. I'll be happy to help. And this is my information, as well as the 2 support ops team, Garrett Yamada and Kyle Levinek. They have done a lot with the Simple Server side, with the repo. They have utilized the Azure CI/CD pipeline to create packages and maintain them easily. They use that in conjunction with GitHub, so that way not only the full-time staff members, but also our student techs can build packages super simple. We just throw it up on GitHub, and then the Azure pipeline takes it away and creates packages as needed, and it's in our private repo. So overall, I like Chocolatey for business solution with CCM, as well as a private repo, and being able to have all the computers talk back to it all. So that is all that I have.
All right, thank you very much.
You have a question?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little confused. Is CCM the Chocolatey console, or is it SCCM?
It is not SCCM. We are actually trying to get away from SCCM, just because we wanted a better way, easier way to package software up. So CCM, like whenever I was saying it, I was referring to the Chocolatey Central Management.
So I guess the larger question there is the Chocolatey client on an endpoint talking to the console, to the management?
So the question there is each Chocolatey client talking back to CCM? Yes. So Chocolatey agent, we have a Chocolatey agent that will be installed on every node that wants to have Chocolatey installed in it, and then it uses a secure connection back to the CCM service that it's reporting its data back into.
And is it current feature?
Yes, it's in beta just now. If you're a business customer today, you, as Laura can testify, is available today for our business customers in a beta format, and then within the next week it should be shipped as a release version as well. So what I was going to show was here's CCM. So this is what it looks like. So you provide a dashboard, or you get a dashboard that explains how many computers you've got in your environment, or more specifically, how many endpoints are checking into CCM via that Chocolatey agent, and then how many packages you've got installed. I've only got 1 machine on this CCM setup, hence why it's 26 and 3 for both of them. But what this allows me to do is it'll allow me to see all of the machines that are available, but then more importantly, it'll allow me to see all of the packages that are installed on that machine, specifically the ones that are out of date. So at a very high level view, you can see across your assets which applications are, or which packages are out of date and which ones need to be updated. So in this first release, it's all about the setting up of the infrastructure and providing those reporting capabilities. So you'll see up here that there's an option to export to PDF and export to Excel. And then there's a higher level report section that allows me to report specifically on just that outdated software. So from a compliance point of view, you can generate reports as needed. That's the first release of CCM. The follow-up release of CCM will include features along the lines of deployments. So if I have got a list of software that I know is outdated on these machines, I can then generate a deployment task, which will then say, take this package and deploy it onto this group of machines. So then at that point, Chocolate Agent will then take care of installing that application onto that machine when requested, and it will report back the logs into CCM. So again, from a central point of view, you have access to all of those things. Okay? So this is available today in beta, but it will be available as a release version very, 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 very soon. So that's pretty much all I had. The only thing I wanted to point out was that's me. If you need to contact me for anything, that's my contact details. I like to say that if you need to contact me, get me on Twitter, because then I'm limited to 208 characters in a response. So you're more likely to get a response on Twitter than anywhere else, but feel free to do that. And in terms of resources, we'll come back to that one. In terms of resources, if you are interested in a trial of anything that I spoke about today, the sales link there is the best way of getting that. We can hook you up with a 30-day trial edition of Chocolate for Business, and there's some links there to docs and learning resources on Chocolate as a whole. So I wanted to leave some time for any additional questions. So any questions from anyone? Yes? The question is, when should I decide where to use Chocolate or whether I should use Chef to deploy my code? The question is, I can't answer that for you. That's up to you. We like to say that Chocolate integrates very, very well with Chef today. Where CCM and the deployment capabilities come into play are really for potentially people that are not currently using a higher level configuration management system. So it might be people who are just starting that automation pipeline and starting to go through that process. So deployments through CCM would be an option at that point, but you could also use a combination of the two depending on your environment. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yep. Okay, so the question is, how do you keep a package up to date once you pull it internal from, say, the community repository? So there's a couple of ways of doing that, and there's a couple of articles on the Chocolate website that talk you through this process. But one of the ways that some of our clients do it is using Jenkins as essentially as a task runner. So they'll set up a task in Jenkins, which then says, go to the community repository and check to see what version is on the community repository. If that differs from the one that's internal in your own repository, at that point run package internalizer again to then pull it down, create that package, and then ideally you would then put that onto a separate internal feed that isn't your production feed, test it out, make sure it works, and then promote that into your other feed. So that's one way of doing it. There is another system known as AU for Automatic Updater. It's a PowerShell module that allows you to directly monitor the source website for the application, and again, scrape that website for when the version changes, and then create the package and then pull it in-house. So there's a couple of ways of doing it, but it's essentially using some other systems that you're probably already using internally. Answer your question? You had a question as well? So does the deployment write to log file, so the CCM deployments? Or which one are you referring to? In the Chef resource. So what will happen just now, so when you do a deployment, or rather an installation of a Chocolate package with the Chef resource, it will be logged in the log file of Chocolate on that machine. So you would need, at the minute, another mechanism to grab that log file as part of the installation if you needed it for some other person. But it would be on the client machine that the install was performed on, yes. Okay? Yes?
Can you speak to the infrastructure requirements for CC Server?
What are the infrastructure requirements for CCM Server? I'm going to say that they're documented on the website. If they're not, it's on me. But I'm fairly sure that they're documented on the website. So I'm not going to lie to you and tell you what they are, but they are there, I think.
Would I would need a specific server for it in addition to a Nexus server or a Firefox server?
So CCM, in terms of a higher scale, and I'm not going to talk about the specs of the server, but in terms of what the requirement, you need IIS as a minimum, SQL Server as the back end for hosting it, and then a Windows Server for running. It runs as a Windows service, so you need to put that somewhere. You can have all, on this machine here, I have all of those things on a single VM running, but depending on your infrastructure requirements, you may need to separate those out or have a remote database. In theory, you could put everything on a single server. The complications that Laura had was with regard to really putting it into IIS as to, they both wanted to fight as the default website, but you can, if you're having a Nexus server as an example, then it's a standalone service running, it's not under IIS. So you could definitely have them on a single server, yeah. I think I'm out of time at this point. If there aren't any questions, all the chocolate people are down at the front here, so feel free to come up and ask any questions you got. Thank you very much.